Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to NCBI's Advocacy Talks, where we bring you interesting conversations and topics each month about people who are living with blindness and low vision. Today we have three, at the beginning of our summer series, our summer travel series, we have three people who are going to share their experiences of holiday travel with being blind or having low vision. We have Aoife Doherty, Tabitha Kenlon, and Peter McCrodden. We're going to ask some questions of each speaker and have a conversation about what those challenges are and how they've been overcome. So let's move on with it. Let's start with you, Aoife. What have been some of your primary challenges when you've been traveling on holiday?
Hi everyone. Aoife is my name. Just to give you an idea about my eyesight, I have oculocutaneous albinism, which affects my hair, my skin, and my eyes. And the level of vision that I have is 636. So anything a fully sighted person can see at 36 meters away, I can see it 6 meters away. So it's not great. I can't drive, but I can do most other things. Myself, my boyfriend are currently traveling around Europe in our camper van. So I think that probably brings hopefully a bit of an interest and perspective on it. And the main challenges that I've kind of come across maybe in the last 2 weeks or so since we've been away is kind of getting to know like the new built environments that you're in. So like obviously at home, I'm from Ireland, so at home we're very used to just crossing the road, and the pedestrian crossing is a green man, a yellow man, and a red, and it should, or most of them have an audio signal, and some of them have a bit of a kind of a tactile feedback on it. But I realised when we were in France that they in Paris and Lyon anyway, that they don't actually have an audio signal, so they just have a green man and a red man. So there's been times I've been trying to cross the road and I've been standing there feeling a bit stupid because I'm waiting for the audio to come in that doesn't come in, but I don't necessarily look up. So kind of getting to know the intricacies like that, I suppose, can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. Generally kind of just getting around. Most of the time signage isn't really that accessible, particularly I find for like bathrooms in restaurants or public places, they're hard to see like from a distance. And then because I suppose I probably do a lot of planning and organising before I go out anywhere, I find that a lot of websites would be inaccessible, or that the information on them isn't necessarily up to date. So you might plan, I'm going to go to see this museum, or I'm going to go to this coffee shop, and I know it's open until 7 o'clock at night or whatever, and you get there and it's either closed or it's the wrong location, and it's quite frustrating to deal with that. And then one of my pet peeves is absolutely bad steps. They're everywhere. By a bad step, I mean one that's very difficult to see. It might be a flight of stairs, it might be just one singular step, but it kind of blends into the road around it. So you'd be walking along happily enough, and all of a sudden you're, not on the same level you were anymore. So so they would be the main challenges that I'd have.
Thank you, Aoife. And how about you, Tabitha? What are your primary challenges when you're on holiday?
I was thinking, so hello everyone, and also to give a quick sense of my sight, I have retinitis pigmentosa, which is degenerative. So every couple years, it seems, I am readjusting to a new exciting lower level of sight, color blindness, tunnel vision, and I've only just recently, the last 9 or 10 months, started using a cane for the first time when I got here to Dublin to do a master's degree. So exciting. So my most recent travel frustration was in May. I went over to London for a couple days, and I've been requesting disability assistance from airlines since I think about 2017. And that was a really wonderful move because I don't have good distance vision either. So it was really hard for me to read signs, know which direction I ought to go into and whether I was at the right gate. So asking for assistance was just, took a lot of the stress out of the travel, just to let somebody else do the scene. And I could just, magically get there. But in May, I encountered incredible delays waiting for assistance. And I do know that, I'm sure we've all heard the news, like everybody is having problems at the airport. And, so in a way it's kind of like, oh, okay, we're, this is to be expected. Nothing is going as planned. But I also just kind of felt like it was just really indicative of how low on the list of priorities people with disabilities are. Leaving Dublin, I waited 63 minutes for disability assistance. And, so ended up going straight onto the plane, didn't have time to get a snack or, anything like that. And leaving Heathrow on the way back, I waited an hour and a half. And then when I got back to Dublin, I waited nearly 45 minutes, missed the bus I had planned on taking, and had to wait another half hour for the next bus. So, it was just really frustrating. And I just, kind of was sitting there feeling like, it's just this reminder that, how low on the list of priorities we can be. So I felt that was really the biggest challenge.
Could you describe for our listeners, Tabitha, about how you arranged that assistance with the airlines? Not everybody might know about that.
And invisible stairs. I have a horror of plazas. They look flat, but there could be a sneaky stair somewhere that you can't spot until you're halfway down it. So adjusting to different built environments can be interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Tabitha. I was just saying there, you mentioned about airline assistance. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit about how you actually arrange airline assistance, because not everybody listening today might actually realize what's involved in that. And it's a very important part of travel, isn't it?
It really is. And like I said, it just, changed. But pre-pandemic, I was living and working in Dubai, and I was teaching. And so I traveled, every time we had a school break. And so it really did change my whole travel experience when I did that. It's not without its hiccups. Usually the request for travel is through the airline, but then it tends to be the airport itself that provides the assistance. I was flying almost exclusively on British Airways, and pre-pandemic, I just had in my personal profile that I would always need assistance due to vision problems. So once it was in the system, I did not have to request it every time I flew. But then on this last flight in May, I was informed that I had not requested assistance. And so that was one reason that I had to wait so long. But then when I'm actually traveling again in 11 days, coming back to London, it's a bad habit, can't break it. And so, I was determined, this time I want to make sure that I do this. So I went into my customer profile booking, and I could not find a place, couldn't figure out how to request the assistance. So I called, and the woman said that I needed, each time I booked, I would need to call to also get the assistance. And then I asked if there was a way to get it back into my profile again. And so she transferred me to someone else, and he said, oh yeah, it's already in your profile. So it was really quite frustrating, because up until this trip in May, every time I'd used disability assistance, it had been pretty seamless. And, sometimes you have to wait a little bit longer because they have more people, but, I'd never encountered this problem, but I still encourage people to use it, because, what happens is you get to the airport, and I had one of the, sort of customer service people take me to the check-in desk. And then they walked me over to the disability assistance desk, and then I waited there, and then I get collected, and someone takes me through security, and helps you do all those things, load up the bin, take off your shoes, get through the the metal detector, all those things, and so this way everyone because since my vision was sort of, has been kind of declining, I'm often in that kind of weird space where I'm not quite blind and not quite sighted, and having the disability assistance just kind of is that like stamp of officialness, like this person can't see, so adjust your expectations accordingly. And then, depending on how much time you have and that sort of thing, they might, take you to a lounge. I know Heathrow Terminal 5 has a dedicated lounge for people who are getting assistance, and there's a disabled toilet in there. So you have kind of your own space away from the the masses, which is nice, because it's kind of quieter. The lighting isn't as bright as all the natural light coming in. And then they come and collect you before your flight and take you onto the airplane before everybody else, even before the babies. You're the very first wave on the flight, so it gives you a lot of time to get settled in. And if you have any questions for the flight attendant, they can go ahead and take care of that. Make sure you know where the toilets are, those important details. Take you through the safety briefing, and then it happens in reverse when you land. They come and collect you from the plane, take you to collect your bags, and then take you out to wherever you need to go to get the taxi or bus or whatever. So I highly recommend it. But these days, I guess you can expect a little longer wait. So bring a good book.
It sounds like it's wonderful when it works well.
It is.
So very convoluted and relies on a lot of different people turning up at the right place at the right time. Thank you very much for that, Tabitha. And over to you, Peter. How about some of your major challenges when you've been on holiday travel?
Sure, just I've experienced everything that Eve and Tabitha have experienced. So I'm taking a journey perspective on it. I have my twin brother and I have both biocular conal dystrophy, which to lay person is that the cones and rods in our eyes, we only have 25% of what we should have, and the ones we have are damaged. And it's down to a recessive gene in both my parents. Professor Keegan has discovered that. Anyway, there's one other person I think in Britain has the same thing. I have a daughter and 2 grandchildren and a son-in-law in Canada. I will be visiting them in the early part of July. To go and stay with them for about 3 weeks. I'm bringing my grandson back to Canada. More likely, he as a 9-year-old will probably be bringing me back. He'd be good at that. But just to start my last journey, which was, I think, is probably September, October 2019, I always get a lift to Dublin Airport because the screens which tell you where your check-in desk or where your check-in bay is, I can't see them. They're far too high up. The lettering is too small and the contrast is impossible. Now, I believe there is a sort of a head high one somewhere on the floor where all the food chain places are, but you'd really have to go looking for it. It should be there at where the other ones. So anyway, I eventually, somebody else pointed out to me, you have to go to such and such a desk, and they're all usually very helpful. And I have pre-told them that getting onto the accessibility crowd in Air Transat. I travel with Air Transat to London or to Toronto Pearson Airport. And there are, I think, 3 terminals in Toronto. And so anyway, look, I once I find my check-in place, I'm fine going through security. Now, if there's a big long queue, I'll use the accessibility one, but I don't use it unless I have to, because I don't deprive somebody else of using it. So the problem I find when I can find the gate fairly okay, because the signage for me is okay. But the problem with the gate is you can find the gate okay, but sometimes the gate numbers change, and I can't see what's on the gate. That it's Dublin to Toronto Pearson or something, or Dublin Toronto Pearson now go to gate 126 or something. I can't see those, so that is a stressful time for me. Getting onto Air Transat flights, they don't use those tunnel things, the carousel things, that you have to actually walk over the tarmac, and it is dangerous because there are things sticking out and all, and I have to be very, very careful of that. I'm traveling on my own. On the flight, once I get on the flight, it's difficult to see the seat numbers. And I've got kind of brazen now that I ask people around me, and 9 times out of 10 they're more than helpful, and always sort of say, yeah, they're actually difficult to see. So anyway, that is fine. I land in Toronto, which is a nightmare. You can think of Dublin Airport, Terminal 1, 10 times bigger with 20 times the amount of people, and it's confusing. So one of your first task is immigration. Now, immigration used to have, you used to get a sheet on the plane, and I always downloaded it so I had a bigger version so I could actually see what I was ticking in, because you could actually be excluded from Canada if you tick the wrong box. You know, you might say, I have ammunition on me, and you don't, of course. So that has changed now to where you go into the airport and you do the immigration form online. Now that is impossible for me. The last time I went there, they're done by carousels, so there might be 6 iPad things on a carousel, but I can't see them and I can't see the contrast. And when you're under pressure and there are people around you in a huge queue of not hundreds but thousands behind you, it's difficult. Now, I found the personnel in Toronto at best unhelpful. Now, that's at best. They were dismissive, and just by sheer doggedness, I actually saw somebody who I thought was maybe a step up because they had a different uniform. So I asked her and she said, oh, actually you can, oh yeah, before that I'd asked one of the personnel. I said, look, I believe I can, how can I get assistance in filling in this? Oh, she said, over there at number 8, carousel number 8. I said, well, I actually can't see carousel number 8. And she just walked away. So through doggedness, I actually found that I could self-declare. So all I had to do is, now it's, unless you're looking for it, you wouldn't find it. It's outside the ordinary, you know, the zigzag queues with the ropes and everything on them. So it's outside in a little corner. And I asked somebody, I said, look, I'm looking for the self-declaration for immigration. I said, I can't see the carousels. And she said, oh, it's over there. I said, where? Where's over there? She said, down there. I said, I can't see it. Just tell me where it is. But anyway, I asked, I don't know if it was a gentleman or a lady who was going with somebody with a wheelchair. I said, where is it? And he said, follow me. So that's the way I found it. It took me 1 minute to get through. And then the next problem is the baggage collection. And unless I know what carousel it is, I find I can't see the baggage collection. You know, the numbers that say carousel 1, 2, 10, or whatever it is, and I can't see those. But what I actually usually do now is I ask somebody, and they're always more than happy to help you. I do find people are more than happy to help you. And then I get out and I get my bags and everything, and that can be challenging, but I have my cases. I have sort of, they're quite, I put tape on them so you actually can see them. So I get them and I go and I get then a bus from Toronto to a place called London, Ontario. I won't give you a prize for telling me what the river running through London, Ontario is. Begins with T. Anyone? The Thames. So anyway, the bus is called Robert Q, and it's kind of difficult to find, but I usually ask, you know, I find are very good pilots or air hostesses. I always ask them, because the people around the airport, the alleged workers, I don't know what they're doing, but they're not helpful. And Robert Q are great. I mean, I know them and they're very good. So that's one. Then coming back from Toronto to Dublin, Toronto is a nightmare because it's so big, and Air Transat's, there might be 200 check-in desks. I mean, it's trying a needle in a haystack, and I find usually that if I ask people in uniforms, I ask them, they will point to a vague direction, but I kind of know where Air Transat's now. Once I get to the check-in desk, I'm fine. Now, I did have an issue with Air Transat because they promised me the last time I was going Dublin to Toronto that I would just ask for assistance and you'll get it. The assistance wasn't available, and it was rather vague, and I sent a letter of complaint, but that's Shin Scale Ella. But when I got to Toronto, because I'd complained, I was bumped up to first class, and I got nice food and free drink. So that's that one, and that's generally my problems.
Oh, thank you, Peter. And there's some great tips and hints there about maybe getting a better meal and a seat on board an aircraft.
Absolutely.
And you've already highlighted some great issues here. And obviously, travel on airlines has been has been a primary one. I think Aoife, you mentioned about road crossings in different countries as well, which is even something as simple as that can be so different when you're traveling. The second question I want to ask you, and you've already started answering it a little bit, but I'd like you to think about expanding the challenging issues that you have in the back of your mind, other than those that you've spoken about. And that's how you've overcome those challenges, how either systems or people have been supportive during that time. And this might also extend to other parts, hotels, could be the built environment still, which is a huge area when you're going to a new country. So you might reverse this a little bit and start with Tabitha.
Okay, let's see. Oh.
Would you like me to repeat that, Tabitha?
Sorry. No, I was finding the unmute. I didn't expect it to be me. You caught me off guard.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So first, my sympathy for Peter, because yeah, I've flown into Toronto just once, and that was one too many times. And I had requested assistance, and you know, they did the absolute bare minimum. But yeah, one tip that I do when I am checking baggage is I always take a picture of my bags before I check in. So then when I'm getting that assistance and they're helping me find my bags, I can show them the picture on my phone and say, this is what you're looking for. So, and I always try to have, like a distinctive, luggage strap and a colorful luggage tag and stuff like that to give them something else to look for. So rather than me just describing, it's black or purple, I can't remember, But I think the way that I really addressed some of my challenges when my eyes started getting worse is I did sort of change the way that I travel, because I usually travel alone, free spirit, and so my favorite thing was just to go to a city and grab a map and wander around. And as my eyes started to get worse, that felt increasingly dangerous. Before I was using the cane, but just if I couldn't read street signs, how was I going to find my way back to the hotel? And this before Google Maps and stuff like that. And I did, even at that point, I think one of the last times I did that was a trip to Athens in 2016 or 17, I can't remember. And I usually try to book a hotel that has a restaurant on site. So so that I don't have to, venture out and try to find a place to eat breakfast or dinner or whatever. And so this place provided breakfast. So they said on, hotels.com that they had a restaurant, but they only served breakfast. So I was lost for dinner. I did not need lunch because I just ate such a huge breakfast. But then the women at the reception desk at the hotel were just incredibly kind, and they just would literally walk me to a restaurant down the block and introduce me to the proprietor and say, take good care of her. And that was great, because I had amazing food that maybe a tourist would not have had otherwise, because they took me to the local spots. So I've found that, being open about the disability and asking for help, I think there are times when I've actually made more connections and had friendlier interactions than I might have had if I was just being, completely independent and not talking to anyone. My last few trips pre-pandemic, I ended up relying a lot more on tour guides. I've never done a group tour. Again, just wanted to do my own thing, but I have booked, personal guided tours, and that, that helped, because I had someone who obviously knew where we were going and could do the driving and give me information about, the temples or, whatever we were seeing. And so I didn't really feel like I was, sacrificing my independence, because, this person is telling me things, giving me information, taking me places that even if I was fully sighted, I'm not sure I would have, ventured forth. And, especially, I went to Sri Lanka and I went to Kathmandu and Nepal. And, both of those times I did individual guided tours. And as a woman traveling alone, even if I had 20/20 vision, I'm not sure, I probably would have still wanted a guide for some of those places. So I've kind of adjusted my destination a little bit, and the way I travel, to kind of, still get to see places that I'm interested in and would really love to experience, and try to kind of blend the needs demanded by my limited eyesight, but still keep that sense of adventure and try to smush them together somehow.
Oh, thank you, Tabitha. That's a wonderful tip for something for us all to remember about. It's great to be independent, but sometimes we can try and be even more independent than people that can see. And having going on a group tour is not giving up your independence. So,
oh well, I can't speak for group tours, but I've only just had individual guides, but I've had that has given me more personal interaction than I would have had otherwise.
Well, very true. And just asking for help led you to get some introduction to some great little restaurants you might never have found before. Just a reminder to everyone before we move on who might be listening, please do put some questions you have of our speakers in, because we're going to keep moving here, but this is a great opportunity to ask those questions you might not have had the opportunity to ask someone who's blind or vision impaired. So, and I think we're moving to you, Aoife. We're just conscious of the time here. We want to get your opinions on all this. What kind of systems of support or individual support have you found to help you in your travels?
Yeah, so I'm traveling with my boyfriend, and as I said, we're kind of driving around Europe in the van. So if I didn't have him with me, I would be driving nowhere. I can't drive. So he's a huge support. I use. If we go exploring places together, he's a great guide. He'll do stuff like read menus, read signs. He'll generally kind of get us from A to B, which is great. So I probably would be a bit lost without him if he wasn't here. When I've travelled on my own, and I have done in the past, usually it's kind of very similar to what Tabitha and Peter is saying. Like, it's very pre-planned. I know where I'm going. I know where I'm staying. I know how to get from A to B. And I think Peter and Tabitha really have kind of just demonstrated how the extraordinary work that kind of we have to do before we even leave our house is to try and get to somewhere. And it kind of does take the spontaneity out of it, but I find having a plan, knowing where I'm going, is what helps me. And the likes of Google Maps is a total lifesaver. I'm really looking forward to when Microsoft Soundscapes comes out on Android devices. Because that looks like a fantastic, fantastic piece of tech that would just make things even easier for people with vision impairments to get around. But I did find a great piece when we were in Disneyland Paris. We were a couple of weeks ago. They actually have a really fantastic kind of interactive, accessible map that you can download. You can get the app where you can download the map onto their phone, onto your phone, and you can use it to kind of get around the park. And they also have the map itself indicates which rides are maybe guide dog friendly, or which rides have maybe darker areas that might be comfortable for people. And so it's stuff like that when you kind of come across, it's just so joyous, because you're like, right, now I feel like I'm here in as much of a capacity as anybody else can be here, because they have put the steps in place to make it completely and utterly accessible. So I tend to rely on technology quite a bit, and a good, as I think my family will probably agree. I love a good plan.
I think that you've summed that up so beautifully, that the combination of planning in advance, of relying on some good technology and new technology maybe, and also of the people around you. It's a lovely combination of all of those things that can come together when people's awareness and kindness, where they step forward and offer some help. They see somebody needs some help. And what about you, Peter? What have your what kind of, you've already mentioned a few things like taping things on your luggage, and being very proactive about who to speak to and who to ask or not to ask. So any other tips and hints that you might give people out there?
Well, I think either Aoife or Tabitha mentioned about the accessibility sections in, I know Air Transat has one and Toronto Pearson has one. Now, the Air Transat on my way out there was useless, but on the way back, because I'd written them a very strong but friendly email, I got the name of a person, And I think it's important to get the name of somebody in the accessibility section, and you call them by their first name, and you refer everything to them, and you can build up a relationship with them. If you say, look, thank you for this went well, blah blah blah, but this didn't, and I found that was a very good thing. Now they gave me an assistant in on my way back to Dublin. Now he was a lovely man, but he was velcroed to me, and I didn't like that. But their idea was you either need somebody all the time. And I said, well, I actually only need it for certain things, but I think they were so concerned that I'd taken action against them for the way I was treated going into Toronto. I think they were worried about that. Of course, that was the last thing on my mind. I just wanted to get home safely. So knowing somebody, having somebody's name, and they can give you they tend to give you their mobile number or somebody else's mobile number you can ring if you're stuck. But it is scary going into to a place like Toronto, because you're on your own and you haven't a clue where anything is. I think too, with regard to asking other people, I think it's part of the human psyche. I think most people are more than happy to assist other people. It makes them feel good, and they do it. So that's about that. But I mean, I have a bit to say in the third section. So I mean, I couldn't add anything much to what Eve and Tabitha have said.
I think the three of you have all described overall the important things about travel and how it feels. Importantly, how it feels when you're there on your own and trying to find your way around. And I think you mentioned, Aoife, about the lack of spontaneity, but with that brings safety and security about where you go and who you're with and who you can ask. So it is sometimes you have to sacrifice something for something else. The last question I'd like to ask you, which will lead us on into our second part of our series next month, when we'll be asking some professionals from the travel industry to come and speak to us, is what advice would you give to people in the professionals, organizations, or whatever in the travel industry about what a person who's vision impaired or blind needs when they're traveling, and how they can get your business, because you're spending money just like anyone else. I might start with you, Aoife, if that's okay, since you're on the road as it is.
Sorry, I was trying to come off mute there and computer wasn't playing ball. Yeah, like God, I think I could be here all day talking about any of the ideas and what we could do to make places kind of more equitable, and more inclusive. So I'll try and keep it short. So please interrupt me if I just keep talking, because I will. Like I think the first thing I wrote down was just ask us. Ask people to get involved. If you're doing if you're doing a build, you're remodeling, you're designing an interior of somewhere, how involved are people, with disabilities in those processes? Now, I'm sure they are. I'm sure there's bits of legislation and procedures and stuff to know, and I know the NCBI do quite a bit on that. But that was the first thing that I thought was ask us. And then I think, for me, like some of the most frustrating stuff is actually the very simple things. So like, I would be kind of saying, I think we need minimum standards for signage and for lighting, particularly for bathrooms, to be like, I know when you kind of go into restaurants or public places, they have these fabulous looking signs that would say bathrooms are this way, but they're usually tiny and you can't see them. Yes, they might be part of the decor and that's great, but like, I can't get to the bathroom independently without interrupting a waiter or interrupting somebody else, which obviously interrupts their service and makes things less efficient. So like, I don't see why. I know we use minimum standards for signage for a lot of things, whether it be road signs or in the airports. Why can't we extend that into the likes of restaurants, other public places, that says your bathroom sign needs to be this font, this size, and it needs to be lit. And the same with lighting for bathrooms as well. Because oftentimes I've gotten there and you end up in a cupboard, because you're kind of like, I've gotten to this far at the bathroom, but there's 4 doors and I don't know which one I got and which one I'm going into, And then I think the other thing would be, for me, would be like physical or digital large font versions of stuff, whether it be a menu, whether it be a brochure, whether it be a guidebook. Like I'm thinking maybe like in kind of museums or kind of attractions or whatever, you know, like reading menus, again, it kind of goes with the aesthetic of a restaurant, and they want their menus to, you know, reflect who they are, and I get that, but you know, oftentimes they're just can't read them, and I rely on my boyfriend to say, can you tell me what I can order here, you know? So to be able to have a large print version available, it doesn't necessarily need to be the main menu, but to be able to have it behind the bar, or have it somewhere where I can ask and say, can I have a large print version of this, you know? It's not a difficult thing, really, I don't think, for us to be able to bring in, maybe to mandate restaurants to be able to do it. I won't talk about steps, because I could just talk about steps, bad steps, all day long. I think every step should have a contrasting edge. You know, oftentimes just get a tin of paint from Woody's, paint an edge on it, and away you go. And it's such a simple thing that I think you know, it's an obvious one for us to do. And then online information, and just keep that up to date. You know, because I think rely on it so much when we're pre-planning. You know, and that's kind of something that struck me. And this is more of a comment about this kind of conversation really than anything else, that, you know, it strikes me how much kind of, you know, how much resilience, how much work, how much stress, how much thought, all of that goes into people who are blind and vision impaired. You know, it takes when we go traveling and when we go out. And I think that's really demonstrated here. And while it says great things about our characters and who we are, and how we can kind of get over these things, it's also really frustrating to hear it, you know, hear of people having this experience of trying to get through the airport. You know, and yes, okay, we do it because we have to, but you know, why should it be so difficult? You know, why should it take Peter send an email to get a name of somebody just so he can get the basic help that he requires? You know, so that's more of a comment, but I'll stop talking because I'll be here all the day.
No, wonderful comments. And the big C of consultation, it always comes up, pre-consultation, of bring people in at the beginning of it all. And some of these things, as you say, are so simple. A couple of menus that are large print on Braille even, you know, it's not going to cost a restaurant very much, but boy, it might get a lot of people coming back, because the word will get around that that's a restaurant that's just gone the extra mile. And you wouldn't have to try and remember when your boyfriend or your partner or family members reading back the menu 10 times, because I don't know how people who are blind or vision impaired do that constantly. Remember what was at the beginning of the menu when somebody reads it out, you know, and you have to go back to the beginning again. So if that pre-consultation on everything, bring people in at the beginning of it. And because it's a competitive world out there, all of these things of hotels and restaurants and that, and they're all looking for business, and it's a big ticket. There's a lot of people out there that are disabled in many ways that have got money in their pockets. Over to you, Peter.
Great. Just two positive things before I go into a rant about what the travel industry can do. One is I don't know if any of you were on it. It was pre-COVID, so it must be three, 4 years ago. Dublin Bus were showing us new buses, and they'd signage and all on them, and the buses were great. They're good, lovely buses. But my brother and I, because we're colourblind as well as visually impaired, we said to him, yeah, that's all great, but I actually can't see what the numbers are on the bus. I said, oh, it's in big writing. Yeah, but the contrast, the pixels or something were wrong. And I'm glad to see that the latest buses of Dublin Bus and Go Ahead, or whatever they're called, the numbers are much easier to see. They're very, there's a great contrast. Now it looks to me like white on black, and it's easier to see. Now I couldn't see it from a distance, but if the bus is 5 meters away, I'll be able to take a good guess at the number. But when I was in Toronto, they had the buses, and the bus would come up to the bus stop, the doors would open and say, this is the number 7A to such and such a place, which I thought was great. And I mean, and that was 5 years ago. The other thing is, I just think, and it's been mentioned by Aoife or Tabitha, I can't remember, is the carriers like Air Transit, Air Canada, Aer Lingus, British Airways, and all, they need to liaise with the airport authorities, because they both seem to work independently with regard to accessibility. So as we say in the Gaelic, Neil Nearco Curna Kayla, there's no strength, you know, united we stand, in other words. That is one thing. The second thing is their disability policies. If you go on their websites, oh, they're lovely and they're shiny and everything, but I don't think that they're reflected at the coalface. In other words, you know, that they have a policy that they're accessible and they support people, but that support is not on the ground unless you go looking for it. They seem to be in a ticking boxes, ticking boxes, but I would suggest that people like the Dublin Airport Authority and Pearson Airport in Toronto, that they should engage. Now they claim to, but I don't know how they do it, engage with disability groups with regarding to making their airports more accessible and more navigable. So there too, travel agents too, that'd be an interesting one. Travel agents don't seem to get it. People who have perfect or near perfect eyesight, they actually just don't get what people being blind or people with poor vision, they just don't get the whole thing. I mean, I remember 50 years ago being in post-primary school, and in geography we had to, map reading came in. Now map reading I'm sure is great, but if you can't see the little minutiae in the maps and you can't tell the colours, you're lost. And I remember my brother and I having a stand-up argument with the headmaster of the school at that time, and he said, "You're stupid looking to get exemption from that." Now, only for a doctor in the eye and ear who wrote a stinker of a letter to the headmaster, my brother and I were given exemption from that, and we were allowed to choose any other question on the paper, which was great for us. So, and then the airport authorities, they should engage with users objectively. You know, you have these kind of spies going into a hotel and they book into the hotel and they go to the restaurant, they go to the bar and they write a report. I think the airport authorities should engage with people with disabilities and say, right, you can use our facilities, and then just at the end of it, give us your feedback, because they're not looking at it from our viewpoint. They're looking at it from their flawed viewpoint. Our viewpoint isn't flawed because we experience it. So that's really all I have to say.
Well, thank you, Peter. And there's plenty there about the training of frontline staff, so that the policies, whether they're hotel policies or airline policies, are put. There's a question that's come in for that. But before that, over to Tabitha. Tabitha, what would you like to? What message would you like to give to the tourist industry generally?
Yes, like Peter and Aoife, I have quite a wish list, but I'll try not to tread over the ground already covered. But I do think that, as you just mentioned, the training of staff who are dealing with the public. So right now, the American Council of the Blind is preparing to hold an in-person convention in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. I'm not going, but I get all of the emails. I'm American, if no one's guessed that. And there's all these details about how the staff at the Omaha airport are being specially trained in advance of this, influx of blind and visually impaired people. And I just thought, well, why aren't they already trained? Why isn't it just a basic part of any customer service training? This is how you handle people with disabilities. These are the questions you can ask people with disabilities, because, all three of us have, obviously different levels of vision and different expectations and different experiences. So none of us is going to want anyone to come up and assume that they know how to help us the best way. But we do want to feel like the people who are there to help us can handle our request and are, open to that. I've stopped, I always ask for a wheelchair now when I ask for disability assistance, even though I'm perfectly fine walking. And I quite enjoy walking, but I don't enjoy holding on to a sighted guide and having my toes run over by wheelie bags or, other people clipping my you know, my shoulder because my sighted guide is not accustomed to looking for two, you know. So I just get the wheelchair so that I'm safe. And I just sit there. So, you know, it is the actual training of people who are in the role of helping any kind of public, you know, customer service. And then, you know, and then just the basics, as Aoife was saying, you know, having these standards, like, you know, there's a ton on the web about making sure that your website is accessible. And hotels and restaurants and airlines and bus companies and train companies, they need to adhere to those standards. They need to observe, you know, the contrast for people who are colorblind. You know, enough of this sexy faint gray font. You know, I can't read it. And yeah, just, you know, asking those questions. And I was really, I haven't been to a Disney in probably this century, but that was really lovely what Aoife was saying. And one thing that really jumped out at me about her description was how her word choice of joyous. She said it was joyous to have that. And, you know, I just think that's a moment that every marketer in the world would latch onto, you know, like if we're going to have an experience that makes us feel included, we're going to tell everybody about that, and we're going to be so happy, and we're going to go back there, you know. So if it's the restaurant that has clearly marked bathrooms and, you know, large print menus, if it's the airline that has the people who actually know how to help you, you know, we're going to keep going back to that, and we're going to tell everybody. So they just, yeah, just the listening, the training, the doing the bare minimum to make it accessible. You know, universal design for travel, I think, is what
that sounds like a great catchphrase for someone to run a campaign on. Thank you, Tabitha, and thank you, everyone. Before we run out of time, we do have some questions that have been asked of you, if I may. I'll just throw this up to whoever wants to answer. The first is more of a comment. And once I was on a flight where they announced the baggage claim conveyor number, which was great. And that would be a huge support if it was done all the time. Any comment on that?
Air Transat do that actually. They're very good. They tell you, but that's going into Toronto. But I think coming into Dublin, it's more hit and miss. They tend not to do it. So I'd agree with that one. That's a great help.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. And the second question here is for anybody that wants to comment, and you've already just touched on it. How would you like people to offer you support when you're out and about? Would you like someone to approach you if they saw you having difficulty, or would you rather ask for help?
Well, this is Tabitha. I'll jump in. I don't mind when people ask if I need help. You know, sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is no. So you know, I never mind when people ask, but if I don't need help, if I'm fine, I do want them to accept that. I believe that I can actually cross the street by myself. That is what the cane is helping me do. But yes, it's always preferable to be asked rather than to have someone assume, you know, like grab your arm, grab your cane, you know, grab your guide dog's harness. My mom has experienced that, you know. So yeah, asking is good.
Anybody else would like to comment on that one? It's a very personal, it's a good question, very personal.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Tabitha. Like, you know, something with the DCs, I do need help. Yeah, it would be good to ask because you know, sometimes the stubborn part of me doesn't really like asking for help, and I know that's my own problem. I can totally get that. But you know, it would be nice. Yeah, it would be nice to be asked and to be able to say, you know, do you need help? What way can I help you? I've had people, you had the best intentions, would take your arm and walking across the road, and you're kind of going, I just need to know what street I'm on. You know, I'm not going this way, I'm going the other way.
So it sounds like good to be asked. No one minds that, but not to be offended if you say no, and certainly not to assume that they can just grab you and take you across the street, which I believe does happen quite a bit. So I don't think anybody really minds being asked for help, as long as the person doesn't take offense when you say no, I'm fine, thanks very much. So that we all have the right to say no, we're fine whether we have a disability or not. we can refuse help anytime that we don't want it. We're coming near the end of our advocacy talks. Is there anything any of you would just like, something that you haven't been able to say yet? Doesn't have to be anything of those 3 questions, very quickly, that you'd just like to add to today's conversation out there.
It was something that Tabitha or Aoife mentioned that reminded me, in the more trendy pubs and restaurants in Dublin, you know, where you probably pay 10 euro for a pint of Guinness, they have these signage on the toilet doors, and sometimes I say, is that the figure of a man or a woman? They're a pain, you know.
I agree with you, Peter. I think sometimes they don't look much different.
They don't. And then you're standing close to it and then you wonder what people are thinking about you.
That is an excellent point. What about Tabitha or Aoife there? Have you got any comment you'd like to make to everyone? Because this is we've talked about raising awareness and education. This is just a great opportunity.
I think Eve and I are both being polite, so I'll dive in. I don't know. I think, like Eva was saying too, you do sacrifice a certain amount of spontaneity, and I do miss that. Like I said, when I first started traveling to learn, I just, my first trip to Paris when I was 25, it was just me and a map in my hand, and I got lost, and it was exciting and invigorating, and I loved every second. And so I do miss, I can't do that anymore. But, I never want to stop getting out there in whatever way I can. And when I spent a couple weeks in Casablanca a few summers ago, and I hired a driver and guide to take me to Marrakesh for a day. And the hotel provided breakfast, so I grabbed a bunch of stuff as I was heading out the door, early start. So I'm just, sitting in the car eating, and I offered a roll to the driver, and he said, "Oh, no, it's your food. I can't take it," And so I tore it in half, and I said, and I handed half to him, and I said, "Here, we've broken bread together. We're friends." And he just beamed. His face just lit up, and I don't think I would have had that moment otherwise. And so even with everything that I miss, and I know that I've given up, and I wish that I hadn't given up, when I do travel, I try to find those moments that I might not have had otherwise. So I would say to anyone listening, if you've been afraid to travel, I understand. I get scared too. But, make your plan, ask for help, and get out there and do what you want to do.
That is an absolutely great message. Before I do a bit of a summary here, I was wondering whether Aoife might like to mention her blog that she's doing on her current travel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll take the opportunity for a shameless plug any day.
Why not?
One thing that Tabitha said, which I just want to reiterate, is about being brave and afraid. And somebody said that to me a couple of years ago, and I've never forgotten it. Just be brave and afraid. And there's brilliant examples out there as well of places that are really accessible, like Amsterdam's train stations are brilliant, metro stations in Paris are brilliant. The signs are there are very, very good. So if you look for people who are in the travel industry and want some good examples, I say just Google it. Really, some good stuff out there. But yes, onto the blog. So yeah, I'm, as I said, traveling around Europe in our camper van, which we built ourselves over the last kind of year and a bit. And I am going to be doing a blog looking at the accessibility of the different places that we're staying in, and the campsites, of the different experiences, and then just kind of maybe some of my own thoughts on what life is like with the vision impairment and traveling, and and kind of bits like that. So I'm on Instagram at Life in the Blurry Lane, and I also have a website which is the same name. So come along and join us.
And who could forget that title, Life in the Blurry Lane? So thank you. Listen, thank you all 3 of our speakers today for bringing such wonderful information and background to people out there who are listening, from whatever area they're in, whether they're in the profession, the tourism profession, or people who are thinking about traveling. You know, you've mentioned so much about the built environment, about people's kindnesses, about being prepared to before you go, and the combination of all of those things. But particularly what I'm hearing is that there are so many little things that can be done that can, as one of you said, make your journey joyous. It can be the Braille menu, it can be somebody helping you out. And I guess if we all look out for people out there that just need that question asked of them, do they need help? It would give everyone a sense of security while they're traveling, whether they have a disability or not, especially traveling alone. So we're going to wrap it up for the day there. So thank you all very much for sharing that. This will be recorded and will be put up on our website for anybody that didn't get a chance to listen to it today. And we will be having a second part of the series next month with some speakers from some parts of the tourist industry that might give their perspective on accessibility and what they've been trying, and perhaps bringing you all together in eventually one day, and those consultations that you've all said need to happen. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.